You're listening to FOJC Radio, preaching the gospel of the kingdom and teaching the doctrine of Christ to the whole world.
Well, good evening and welcome to FOJC Radio. I am David Carrico, and we are here for a special Monday night broadcast. Our program tonight is entitled Flat Earth and Scientism, with our very special guest and good friend, Mr. Zen Garcia. Welcome to FOJC Radio, Zen.
Honored to be here. I appreciate the opportunity, and it's always a blessing to be with you and Donna, and I thank you for the invitation.
And you are no stranger to our FOJC Radio listeners, because we have many of our projects that we've done together on our YouTube channel, so I'm sure that almost everybody knows who you are and a little bit about what you do. But in case there might be someone that doesn't, why don't you tell people how to get in contact with your ministry and all of your material before we go forward?
Okay, no problem at all. The easiest way to contact me is through Facebook, Zen Garcia. I post all of my upcoming shows there, which I do 2 radio programs, one on Revolution Radio every Wednesday evening, 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern at freedomslips.com, and I do a Saturday evening broadcast, 7 to 9 p.m. on truthfrequencyradio.com. I'm the webmaster for fallenangels.tv. Our YouTube channels are Endeavor Freedom and Zen Garcia. And you can find most of my books located on my author website, zengarcia.com.
And I just really appreciate Zen coming on tonight. He has done so much work in this area of flat Earth, and our broadcast is entitled Flat Earth and Scientism, Refuting the False Science of the Spinning Globe. And I did a teaching, my first on flat Earth, called Falling Off the Flat Earth, where I dealt with the scriptural issues. But tonight, Zen has been so kind as to come on and talk about the scientific aspects of it. And it's the false scientism that keeps the globe spinning, so to speak. So I believe the first thing that most people say when they hear about the flat Earth is they bring up the NASA photos. You know, haven't you seen the pictures? So if you will, Zen, just here at the top, let's talk a little bit about the NASA photographs.
Well, I think this is really important as well, because for most of us, in buying into the heliocentric worldview, we have accepted NASA as the authority, and the photographic evidence and the videographic evidence, all of the belief in the astronauts as far as the visitations to the moon, the satellite programs, the Voyager, all these different programs that they have, even the so-called secretive programs where they have colonized Mars and these kind of different things, the Mars Defense Forces and all of this. And so all of us have, without really even second guessing, have bought into and accepted what they have said as being evidently true without, why would we ever question? And I never did so. And it was really second nature for us to accept the indoctrination that we have all been programmed into believing in growing up in school and going through the educational process, looking at the globe, sitting around with our classmates and everybody looking at the globe and the countries of the world and the way that they're all laid out, and the Earth being a sphere, and the whole as far as even with the cartoons and the scientific programs, Cosmos and everything, where they have shown us repeatedly over and over again the heliocentric model for how our supposed solar system and planetary system is set up, and how it also is repeated as galaxy and other star systems, that every one of those stars out there is also a sun. The Hubble space photographic evidence of the cosmos, the various galaxies, all of the different images of the different planets, the moons of all these various planets, and how it all just seemed to make sense that, well, that was the way that it was. And then when I began to really look into the photographic evidence, after I was introduced to the possibility that what we had been told and what we had been indoctrinated into all of our lives could be fabricated, well, that was one of the things that all of us immediately go to, is, and also those that want to refute flat earth cosmology, the biblical geocentric model for world as possibility. Well, that's the thing that they do, is they always fall back on, well, all these images of Earth that NASA has taken. And so when I began to examine some of that in a more thorough manner and looking into it in very in-depth, well, there was already some things that came up which did not make sense, and that was the various images of the Earth that have been taken over the years from multiple supposed Apollo space program, from different satellites that have been sent up there now, and even just recently they just sent up a new supposed weather satellite and have all these really high def images of the Earth as a globe. I don't know if you've seen those yet or not, David.
Yeah.
But
yes, I have.
Yeah. And so, people are falling back on those. But again, if you look at all of these different images, the full summation of them over the life of NASA and the various programs, the various Apollo mission programs, and the Clementine satellites, all these different images, well, there's some contradictions in the size of just the continents themselves, North America, South America, Africa, and also with the colors of the oceans, the size, the proportions with regard to the moon, and so there's seems to be no coherency. And then when you listen to even the testimonies of like the various astrophysicists, Neil Tyson, he speaks of the Earth as being an oblate spheroid, and that it's supposedly not round as in a perfect sphere, but in the shape of a pear. And so they can't even stay coherent in their presentation of the Earth. And there was also another image that I've seen that was supposedly an image of the Earth from space, and it showed all the cloud layers and the cloud bands, and they weren't they stood out and above the Earth, whereas the oceans being showed the rotundity, and all these cloud layers were standing out past it. And so this was a whole nother way of presenting the Earth in this spheroid shape. And so when you look into and start to examine, well, you realize that in this day and age, when we're supposed to have all these 20,000 satellites up there, we should be able to view the Earth in all of its glory 24 hours a day in live feeds and live streams through various different websites from all these different companies that have these, privately owned satellites and all these government satellites from the various different space agencies. Why they wouldn't have just 24-hour live feed of the Earth from different angles and perspectives is one of the clues as to why we should question what NASA is putting out. And again, when you look into some of the images that we have of the Earth, they are clearly defined as being composites and having been pieced together and formed in the shape and in the perspective that we have them. And so the fact that there's only even a handful of these images over the length of the life of NASA and all of these different programs is also makes you wonder as to why that is. Why is there not just thousands of images, hundreds of thousands of images, or even thousands and hundreds of thousands of videos of all of this evidence? And then the other thing which really made me question as to the relevancy of what we are being shown in depiction from the various NASA images and these composite images is the video that was gathered through the Freedom of Information Act by Barry Seibel when he did his documentary A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon, where it shows the Apollo 11 astronauts, Michael Collins and Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin, two of them in the lunar capsule, and they are trying to use the window of the lunar module to hoax and to fabricate the Earth as being in a spherical shape, which you have to question. And in this particular video, it shows and has the full audio of where they are speaking with the Houston, with the command center, and talking about how they were going to hoax it. And then you can see how they indeed used the window of the lunar module to fabricate this deception. And if the Earth is indeed round and in a spherical shape and like a globe, well, why would they need to hoax it in such manner and try to lead us in deception into believing it is in a shape that it should already be in? And so that's another thing that really made me question as to the relevancy of what we've been showing. And then we know our brother Rob Skiba has done really incredible work where he's utilized Photoshop as a tool to examine some of these official NASA images. And one in particular, he was able to take a very famous image of the astronaut, one of the Apollo astronauts on the moon, with the supposed Earth rising in the background above his left shoulder. And so Rob pulls this directly from the JPL website, I believe it was, or the official NASA website. It was an official NASA image. He pulled it, downloaded directly from the website, posted it into his Photoshop, quickly changed a few of the layers and the contrast, and it shows clearly that there is a rectangular box around the Earth. and it, in my mind, it had to have been one of the images of the Earth that was fabricated through the lunar window, the module, and they had cut and paste this into the image in order to, again, to show that the astronauts had actually achieved, and NASA had accomplished sending them to the moon, and that they were there on the lunar surface, and that the Earth was distant in the background. And so all of that is called into question as well, as far as the veracity of whether we ever went to the moon. And then just recently, NASA released in a video that they released called Orion Trial by Fire, where they spoke about the difficulties of achieving a mission they are working on now, which is called the Orion Project, where they spoke about sending these different astronauts to Mars for a manned mission to Mars, and how they were unable to, at this time, to get beyond the Van Allen radiation belts. And they spoke about how sending the Orion mission through the Van Allen radiation belts, that because of the extreme radiation, that not only would it compromise the computer systems, but it would also endanger the life of the astronauts. And so they spoke about in this video of having to figure out how to protect the astronauts and to send them beyond the radiation belts without them being affected adversely. Which, in my mind, if they are not able to achieve this now, and they are having to consider what to do in order to protect the lives of the astronauts and also the computer systems, how in the world were they able to do this multiple times during the Apollo missions, when the computer technology that they had to achieve those missions was less than the computer technology that we have in our regular cell phones in this day and age? And so it just absolutely does not make any sense. And then Bart Sibrel, the person that put together the whole documentary on Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon, he does a follow-up of that particular video, that documentary, called Astronauts Gone Wild, where he goes and he speaks with each one of the different astronauts that claim to have been on the surface of the moon. And he asked them to share in testimony their experience. He asked them about the Van Allen radiation belts, and there's a particular testimony I remember very clearly from Alan Bean, where he speaks about not even remembering going through the Van Allen radiation belts, but then he says that he remembers one time where he had his eyes closed and he could see these tracers of lights flickering in his eyes when he had his eyes closed, but that was the only thing he remembered of them, and none of them were adversely affected at all, and they were not given any amount of protection from the radiation. There's the Russian scientists also have claimed that in order to truly protect the astronauts from these radiation belts, they would have to encase the lunar module in so much lead that they wouldn't even be able to get it off of the ground. And so for us, in their own testimony, in all of their own words, it is impossible for them to have achieved getting beyond the radiation belts then, and even now. So that in and of itself brings into question all of the Apollo missions and all of these supposed astronauts having gone to the moon and back. And then when you look at the work of, even as I mentioned, Rob Skiba, in breaking down and showing that a lot of these NASA images are completely contrived and hoaxed. And there's been many that have also examined the official Apollo images, where they show multiple light sources and various shadow angles to the images that absolutely confirms them having been fabricated in some Hollywood studio somewhere, because there's no way that they could have achieved taking these images on the moon when the sun was the only light source and all the shadows would have ran parallel to one another, going all in one direction. And so that I ask anybody to consider the things that we're speaking about here, and to go look at these images, and and just ask yourself whether any of them could be true and real.
And we might give a plug-in for our old friend, Brother Rob. If anyone out there, and I'm sure there are, I'm relatively new. Well, I'm not relatively new. I am a newbie to the flat Earth. I began 2016 as a glober, but as 2016 went out, I was no longer a glober. But if anyone out there is skeptical of the flat Earth, if you would go to Rob Skiba's website, testingtheglobe.com, I believe it is, you could just really spend a lot of time there. Rob has just done some tremendous work. And as Zen has pointed out so well, there's huge problems with the whole NASA thing. And beyond all the discrepancies, the JPL, the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, is tied to Jack Parsons and the occult with Aleister Crowley, Operation Paperclip with the Nazis. NASA is loaded with Freemasons, and it's just a whole hodgepodge of evil, the whole thing. And someone in the chat room brought up, I think it was Brother Mark, and Brother Mark Rogers is very knowledgeable about flat Earth, and I'm going to do a program here in the near future with Brother Mark on flat Earth also. He is just so knowledgeable about it. And he brought up the fact of the first press conference that was done with Buzz Aldrin and Neil Armstrong.
Yes.
And I mean, they looked like someone had messed up their breakfast cereal or something. I mean,
right.
There was just something not right with that whole thing. But I want to ask you, Zen, a very elementary question, and I'm asking elementary questions because I'm an elementary guy, and a lot of our listeners have never even considered the flat Earth concept until here recently. But why would these people go to all of this trouble to put this lie in place? Why would they do it?
Well, all of that has to do with three aspects, in my opinion. And all of these things are linked with one another, and they are connected to what the Bible also speaks about as the coming strong delusion. And that, in my opinion, has to do with the Darwinian theory that man evolved of some ape-like ancestor, and that according to the heliocentric worldview, that the Earth is not special, that humanity is not special, and that the other stars out there are all suns. They all have surrounding planetary systems, as we see portrayed in the heliocentric model here, of the Earth being one of 9 satellites which revolve in orbit around the sun as the center of this planetary system, and that even the sun moves in circuit around what is the galactic center, and that our galaxy, the Milky Way, is just one of a spiral arm of many galaxies which are orbiting some universal center. And so they are perpetuating the idea that that these different planetary systems, as long as they are in the perfect distant extent from their starry center, with us specifically with our sun, and the our distance being supposed 93 million miles away, that the Earth is 93 million miles away, that puts us at the correct distance for us to not be burned up from being too close to the sun, or frozen in being too far away from it. And because we are in this supposed Goldilocks zone, that it creates the perfect circumstances for the Earth to then evolve life out of just random circumstance, and that all of these other suns and stars that all have their own planetary systems, that as long as they have a planet orbiting around them at the perfect distance, depending on their the amount of heat, the amount of light that they are putting out, that they will also randomly evolve life as we see it reflected here upon the Earth, and that there's no need for there to be an intelligent designer, a creator, or a God, a persona of God, to have influence in the organizational process or the creation of what we see Earth-like planet. That all of that can just happen out of chance, according to what Scientism, which is, in my opinion, the New World Order religion, New Age theology, that they have us all now buying into. And all of these things are dependent on and are leading up to, which is the next aspect and phase of the whole New Age theology that is Scientism, and that is that the ancient aliens are the creators of humanity, the benefactors, the saviors, and that they are coming and returning in order to save us from ourselves. That the reason we are not able to identify this so-called missing link, this particular evolutionary humanoid that ties together ape and man, is because it was the ancient aliens which jumped the gun on evolution and genetically experimenting upon humanity, the pre-Adamites, so very long ago, that it was their interjection, either through genetic experimentation or through direct engagement, as it says in Genesis 6, with their taken wives of the daughters of man, that is what created modern humanity. And that for whatever reason they left here a long time ago, and with the promise of coming and returning back at the end of days in order to save us from ourselves. And this is the mythology that is being propagated in all the pagan cultures and religions of the world. And the reason it is being done so is, in my opinion, is because, as the Bible warns us and affirms, the Antichrist is going to be revealed, and is going to be given authority over the beast system that is established as the New World Order system at the end of days, before the second coming of Christ, and before he comes to judge the sins of the world and to separate the harvest of the wheat, the children of perdition, from the children of promise from the tares as the children of perdition, the goat and the sheep, those that follow the broad way and those that follow the narrow way. And so it's completely found within the scripture the true, as far as the scenario, that Lucifer, in wanting to establish him as being as or like the Most High, that the foundations for this entire deception, in my opinion, are located in Isaiah 14 and Ezekiel 28, with all of his I wills, his affirmations of wanting to establish himself, to set his throne above the stars and the clouds of God, and to put his seat in the mount of the congregation, and to be like the Most High. And that what we see in the world now as the creation of not only this substitute cosmology, where the earth has been replaced by the sun as the center of our universal system, and that the earth has been demoted to being just one of the planetary subjects of the sun, we also see a substitute calendar system which has been put into place, a substitute religion which worships the sun god and Lucifer in idolatry, and also substitute holidays, substitute these different holy days, and these instead of us honoring and revering the Levitical feast days, all of that has also been replaced by pagan holidays. And we also see the substitute of the God's calendar system, which, based on the cycles and the phases of the moon, helps us to determine when the true Sabbath is. And that has also been, in accepting the Gregorian solar calendar, Sabbath has also been established as occurring every 7 days, when, according to God's calendar, it is all determined and based upon Kadesh, which is the time of the new moon. And so all of these things have been put into place in order to establish worship of Lucifer in these idolatrous pagan ways and manners, and in this new replacement theology, so that mainstream Christians have no idea that they are involved in this idolatry, nor that they are breaking many of these central commandments, especially the second and the fourth, and because of that, they have no idea what they are truly involved in. And
it is just amazing, and you're talking to the choir now, that all these things are so interrelated. And once you come to the flat earth understanding, the ancient alien thing is off the table, and evolution is off the table, and just a lot of this nonsense. You're never going to believe it once you come to this flat earth understanding, and it's such a marvelous revelation. Now, there is a question here, Zen, in the chat that I want to pass along to you from Roger 417. Are there other planets, and or what are they? What about the image of Saturn with the rings?
Well, yeah, they are other planets, but they're not Earth-like, because the Earth is not a planet. The Earth is the foundation for what is the establishment of the vaulted dome, which encompasses it, and the so-called planets, which are the wandering stars, and also the other stars and the sun and the moon, they have all been put into circuit around Polaris, which is the fixed star. That Polaris, like the Earth, is fixed, stationary, unmoving, and these heavenly luminaries move in circle around Polaris because the heavens work like a giant clock. And this clockwork system was put into place in order to give us the breakdown of the seasons, the years, the days, the hours, the months, and also the various cycle, the great cycle, which is the movement of the sun through the various zodiacal constellations, and all of those are connected to various time, and also it helps us to establish the passing of time, and also to determine signs and seasons, and also the holy days, the Levitical 23 feast days and festivals, which we are supposed to be adhering to and recognizing. Passover, unleavened bread, the Feast of First Fruits, Pentecost, the Feast of Trumpets, Day of Atonement, and also the Feast of Tabernacles. And those are, when you understand, they are harvest feasts. They determine the cycles of the harvest in the way that the seasons move from spring, summer, fall, and winter. And they also determine the various crops as they come into season, because the Feast of First Fruits, these 7 weeks leading up to the Pentecost, they are celebrations, weekly celebrations of the 7 predominant and major crops that are grown in Israel. And so it ties together with the unfolding of the seasons of the year to the way that the earth comes into bloom over spring, summer, and fall, and the various harvests and the crops that ripen and come to fruition over that time. And then through the winter you have 1 month of rest. And all of this is reflected in the way that God has established the various feasts and festivals, and the determination of how his calendar system works according to the phases of the moon. And it's not just the lunar calendar that we are to adhere to, but when you study the book of Enoch, there are in fact 2 different calendars spoken of. One 354-day lunar calendar, which alternates according to the synodic month, which is the average cycle of the moon as it goes through its 4 phases, which it averages 29.531 days. And so the lunar calendar alternates between 29 and 30-day months, and that equals to a 354-day year. And then we are also to adhere to the Enochian solar calendar, which is based on the movements of the sun as it transits back and forth between the Tropic of Capricorn and the Tropic of Cancer. And Enoch describes this calendar as beginning on the vernal equinox on the that's the first day of spring, when the sun is positioned on the 4th gate, and then those 3 months that it's moving towards the Tropic of Cancer are the 3 months of spring. And when it reaches the Tropic of Cancer for the summer solstice, it then reverses course and begins moving back down towards the equator. And when it reaches the equator, those are the 3 months of summer. And then on the autumnal equinox, that when it reaches the equator again for the autumnal equinox, that's the first day of fall. And then the sun moves into the southern hemiplane for what is the 3 months of fall, and that is summer for these southern latitudes. And it will move from the equator for 3 months towards the Tropic of Capricorn, and then when it reaches the Tropic of Capricorn, that is the first day of winter. It will then reverse course, and for the next 3 months of winter, will move back towards the equator, and once it reaches it again for the vernal equinox, that begins an entirely new year. And so it takes the sun 30 days to move through each one of these gates, which equals 360 days. It takes it 180 days to move from the tropic, from one tropic to the other, and then you have the 4 days of the 2 solstices and the 2 vernal equinoxes, which equal 364 days. And so every year the lunar calendar is 10 days short. And so after 3 years, the way that the lunar calendar is again realigned with the Enochian solar calendar is they add a 13th month, which is called Adar number 2. And the second Adar is the 13th month, and they will usually have it about every 3rd year. And that will put the calendar system back in alignment with the barley harvest, because the Feast of Passover and also the Feast of First Fruits, those celebrations are dependent upon the barley harvest, and the barley harvest has to be ripe in order for the wave offering to be, for the high priest to offer the barley in a wave offering for the sins of Israel on the day of first fruits. And so if the barley is not ripe, they will add this 13th month, and it will realign the calendar with the Enochian solar calendar. And it really is a beautiful and simplified system, which is, for those that follow it and adhere it, it's easy to maintain. All you have to do is look up into the heavens during the night to see where the phases of the moon are in order to determine where one is in the movements of the lunar calendar, and according to the various phases of the moon, because all of them align with the various Sabbaths, and also the new moon as the first day, Kadesh, that is the first day, and the new moon celebration. And so it's a really beautiful system, and it's deeply profound in that one can determine and usually catch up with even with where the sun is, because the ancient priests, they knew according to where the sun was, because it moves like on the day of the winter solstice. It will be as far as it will reach in the southern skies, and then after it reaches the winter solstice, it will begin moving back towards the northern skies. On the when it reaches the equinoxes, it will be in the very center of that movement, and then on when it reaches the summer solstice, that will be as far north as the sun will reach. And so the sun is dancing back and forth on the horizon, going from north to south, depending on what month it is. And this also shortens and lengthens the hours of day according to where the sun is, and depending on what latitude and where you are living on the circle of the earth. And so all of that is deeply and profoundly beautiful as well. And there's so many, like all of the ancient cultures and civilizations, they would establish these very, like Stonehenge is also a calendar system, and it is also aligned with the various solstices and equinoxes, and most of the different cultures, wherever they were at, they would establish calendars to determine according to where the sun was on the horizon on those particular days. They would establish these very elaborate calendars to mark those occasions and those particular days, so that they would know, according to the movement of the sun as it danced back and forth across the skies, what month it was, and as well when to plant harvest, when to gather the harvest, and when winter was coming. And so they knew by the movements of the stars, the sun and the moon and the heavens, as to where they were in the timeline of the year.
And it is so interrelated. And our old friend Copernicus, when he had his heliocentric revelation, he was actually working on the calendar. So it's so related. We have a question here from our friend from down under, Tracy Aussie. So why do they now talk about going to Mars? Is there a reason why they are still faking it?
Yes, and it's my opinion is because they want us to believe that these other planets are Earth-like and that they can be inhabited, because it's only by perpetuating such belief that they can then, at some point later, when these ancient aliens are basically unveiled to the world and the Antichrist is revealed as this alien savior, that they have to have these belief systems set into place in order to get the world to believe and to buy into that this Antichrist is indeed an ancient alien, and that they were the creators of humanity so very long ago, as I spoke about earlier in the program. And so, as we can see according to the program, Ancient Alien and all of these other books that are now coming out on the Sumerian mythologies, that even Zecharia Sitchin and his postulations, and all of these various individuals that believe the Sumerian mythology is older than the biblical mythology, and that the Christian faith is actually a amalgamation and a counterfeit of either the Sumerian or the ancient Egyptian. All of that is contrived. And I listened earlier to a show that you did, David, the Antediluvian Book of Job, and you put it so very eloquently in that particular show about how these pagan mythologies and these various counterfeit stories of the Book of Job, that they are based on the Christian narrative and not vice versa.
Amen.
And yes, and just as I have shown in my work with the Thracian Chronicles, there is now has come to light the Thracian script. It was just decoded by one of my friends in 2006, and after having decoded this language, they were then able to unlock all these various myths from the Thracian language that remained undecipherable. And having broke down and deciphered this language, it was a Rosetta Stone for them going back and being able to interpret this huge collection of works called the Thracian Chronicles. And what now has come to light is that they have the oldest translation of what is the first book of Adam and Eve is one of the translations. There's also a Latin version called the Vitae of Adam and Eve, a Hebrew, an Armenian called the Conflict of Adam, all these different stories about the life of Adam and Eve. Well, in the Thracian, there's a chapter, the first chapter, which speaks about the Trinity, and they call Jesus Isus, I-S-U-S, Isus, and they also in this, and it dates back to 400 BC, but like the book of Adam, I mean the book of Enoch on the discourse of the Son of Man, it also has confirmation as to the coming of Christ and how he would be born of a virgin, that he would die in order to redeem Adam and his descendants, and that he would return them to their former estate and bring them back into paradise after he incarnates into flesh form. And so the Thracians were Christians, and they were believers and followers of Christ. And these various books of the Thracian Chronicles prove this, and they predate the Sumerians and the ancient Egyptians, and it has also been shown that the Thracian script is the origin for the ancient Egyptian hieroglyphic system, and they predate the Sumerians by 1,500 to 2,000 years. And so their stories and their mythologies show and affirm that, as you had brought forth in your show on Antediluvian Job, that indeed the Christian narrative and the stories as passed down through Adam and Noah and others, that the Christian faith and the stories of the biblical narrative most certainly predated all of the pagan mythologies, and that the counterfeits that you find contrived and also corrupted in these pagan cultures and civilizations, that they are replications of the ancient Hebrew stories, and it's not vice versa as the world currently believes.
Yeah, and I'm definitely going to have to learn more about that. That is absolutely fascinating. Now, I have another question here. This is from Mark 4:17, I believe. And under the flat Earth model, is space finite?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And there's actually a way that you can test that out. And I was actually speaking to somebody about this not very long ago, because we know that according to the cosmology, and I wrote about this in my last book. Well, I got a new one out, so this is actually the one before my new one, but in the book that I wrote on the firmament, the vaulted dome of the earth, I showed that the vaulted dome of the earth is, in the Hebrew cosmology, a solid structure which encloses and covers over the circle of the earth. And that whereas in the science they believe that you can bounce radio waves off of the atmosphere, what they are truly in fact bouncing the radio waves off of is the solid firmament, the vaulted dome of the earth, which encapsulates and covers over the entire circle of the earth. And I know that it's absolutely mind-blowing to imagine and to conceptualize the vastness of the earth, the wide, broad breadth of the earth as being covered over by this solid molten looking glass, but in fact, that's what is affirmed by the prophets and also by Scripture. And so it is my opinion that the radio waves that are being sent up and that are being bounced back towards us, that all of that is possible because of the vaulted dome being in fact in place there above us.
And very good. Thank you so much. And thank you for coming on tonight and letting us work you over here a little bit. And by the way, Zen's book on the firmament, the vaulted dome of the earth, which I have right here, it's one of those. It is the book that probably caused me to fall off the flat earth. It is certainly a very good one. And there for a long time I says I'm on the edge of the flat earth getting ready to fall off, and then Zen pushed me right on over the edge. But here's another question. Why have there not been more flat earth whistleblowers, or if there have been any?
It's because we have been... Well, they told us that this question, as far as the cosmology of the world, that it has been 500 years ago confirmed that the sun was the center of the solar system, and that the earth was a planet which was in fact spinning once daily as it moved annually in orbit around it. But what we did not realize, and what is not taught in school, is that there have always been individuals which have contested such notion, and that anytime there's a scientific experiment established to detect the motion of the earth or to establish the rate of its spin, it has been shown and verified that the earth is not spinning at any rate of speed, and that there is no motion to the earth. As the Bible affirms, the earth is fixed, stationary, and unmoving. And there's several chapters and passages which affirm that, and the real science, as has been put forth in various experiments like the Michelson-Morley and Michelson-Morley-Gale, the Sagnac experiment, the Aries failure, where they were trying to detect the motion, the spin, the rate of spin of the earth. All of those experiments were failures because they were performed by heliocentricists that were trying to detect the rate of the motion of the earth. And they failed because the earth is not spinning, and so these experiments actually became evidentiary truth and confirmation of the biblical attestation that the earth is in no way moving. And so these experiments became actual evidence and proof of the truth of God's word. And so these different experiments are not spoken about in the universities, and they are not taught because they, again, are trying to keep us established and locked into the indoctrination and the mindset that we are living on a globe-like spheroid planet which spins once daily as it moves annually around the sun, when in truth you can look at how the time-lapse photography and what it shows that all of these stars, all of the planets, the sun and the moon are all moving in uniform motion at the same rate of speed around Polaris as the center of what is the vaulted dome. And that what is even increasingly wonderful about the knowledge of how the stars move as is affirmed by this time-lapse photography, is that once you understand and know about the cosmology, it, as I show in that book on the firmament, God's throne is established directly above Polaris as the center of the vaulted dome of the earth, and that his throne sits there, and that the heavenly temple is established there as well, as it says in John chapter 4, where he speaks about seeing God seated on his throne, and that before him, underneath him, is a sea of glass. That is the top of the vaulted dome, once you understand the true nature of the enclosed world system that we live in. And so, because the heliocentric model, they want us to believe that there's all these different Earth-like planets out there, and they're all orbiting around these different sun and star systems, and that the universe is infinite and ongoing into infinity, and that God really, because the universe is so vast and large, that he's too busy to really be focused in consideration on us as his prodigal child, as his bride, and that he has to really keep up with and to be distracted with consideration of all of these other worlds. And as long as they can keep us buying into the vastness of the universe, they can really get us to believe and to buy into that God is just simply too busy with all of what is going on out there and with all of these other worlds to even really be worried or even focused in any way, narrowly minded on what's going on here on the earth. And because of that, really, there's no judgment, there's no worry about what we do and our actions or our behaviors, because there's no judgment, there's no real salvation, we're not even special, there's not even a God. And so we can do what we want and, treat others badly and not be concerned for our neighbor, and because, the heliocentric worldview negates the Bible as the true Word of God, there's no reason to follow the commandments. There's no reason to love one another or to honor our mother or fathers or to worship a God who's not even, focused on us and that may not even exist. Just do what you want and, and compete with one another and try to hoard as much substance and as much money, and don't worry about the poor because you got to worry about your children and things like that. And as long as they can get us to buy into the carnal aspects of our flesh incarnation and these temporary lifetimes, then they can distract us and to keep us from prioritizing the kingdom and of really focusing on our eternal inheritance and to following the commandments and to caring for our brothers and sisters, for clothing the naked and feeding the hungry and taking care of the orphan and the widow and taking care of the poor and being a foot washer to each other as example to us by our King and our Lord. And so this, in my opinion, is also one of the other reasons for the whole basis of the Darwinian heliocentric worldview, because what other system has separated us from God in such profound manner as the belief that we evolved as monkeys and that there are multiple millions of Earths out there and that God is distant and far away, when in fact he's right there above Polaris looking down on us as the only show in town, as the only thing that's going on, because Earth is it. We are special. The earth was specially created for us to inhabit it, and the stars and the sun and the moon, the heavenly luminaries, they were put in circuit above our earth in order to be and to show and to help us determine the passing of time. And they work, again, as a giant clockwork in order for us to help us to determine the season that we are in, as far as the passing of time, and our being the last generation, the fig tree generation. And so all of these things were established for us by our God, whose image we were created in. And if that's not special, I just don't know what is.
Amen. Amen. And we're going to take a short break, and we're going to be back, and I'm going to start the second portion off. I have a very compelling question from Brother Mark Rogers for Zen to start the second portion off here. Now, this is what they want us to believe, and people think that we're crazy that believe flat earth, but this is what the scientist priests want us to believe, that the earth is spinning at 1,040 miles per hour, that the earth travels around the sun at 66,000 miles per hour, that the solar system moves inside of the Milky Way galaxy at 490,000 miles per hour, and that the Milky Way galaxy is moving through space at 1,000,000 miles an hour. You gotta be kidding. And they think we're crazy. But anyway, we're going to take a short break, and we're going to be right back with lots more questions for Zen. Thank you so much for all of you tuning in tonight and taking part in the chat. And we're going to be right back with lots more for Zen.
Make sure to subscribe to FOJC Radio on YouTube. There's a lot of imitations, but only one is the real thing. Thank you, and be blessed.
Look for the open door for FOJC Radio on YouTube. You're listening to FOJC Radio, where truth in the Word of God is found.
Well, welcome back, everybody, to our special Monday night broadcast on FOJC Radio, Flat Earth and Scientism, refuting the false science of the spinning globe with our good friend Zen Garcia. And I always enjoy spending time with Zen. Old brother Zen is just an absolute hoot, isn't he? I just love picking Zen's brain and listening to his take on so many topics. But we have a very compelling question here from Brother Mark Rogers. How much have you looked into the electric universe theory of our good Mr. Tesla, or the new 4D model put out? Just curious if Zen has seen these. What do you say, Zen?
I have not examined this in great detail, but I will at some point. Those of you that follow my work, you know that I am working on a trilogy right now on the War in Heaven and what I reference as the Great Contest. But after I finished the first two books, which I did just finish the first book of this trilogy, just even today, the last proofread of, and so I'll be releasing it to the public. But I have a book which is part of the whole book that I wrote for the firmament. But because I gathered so much information for that book, I had to separate out 8 chapters. And this particular book is called Paradise, the Sides of the North, and the Mount of the Congregation. But in this book, I examine the toroidal field, which is based on the electromagnetic universe, and the way that the magnetic toroidal fields are set up, and how they show that there is an opening in the north and also in the interior of the earth at what leads down to the great abyss, and that these magnetic fields also show the structure of the enclosed world system. And so I will be going into more elaboration and into further study on this as topic when I begin to finish that book. And as I said, it's mostly already written. I just have to add to certain aspects of the research, and this is one of those various aspects which I will be going into and elaborating upon, because as I've already shown and determined within this portion of the book, it's my opinion that Jacob's ladder, or what we see as the where the angels ascend and descend on the ladder of heaven, that opening is connected to where the North Pole and to Polaris. That this ladder and this opening into the interior of the Earth, what David and I have done shows previously on with the opening, the hollow opening into the interior of the Earth, that this is also located there at the North Pole, and that this is a reflection of the electromagnetic universe as depicted by this this toroidal field. And so I will be going into, again, as I said, great elaboration, and it will be tied to so much very interesting information and study that I've done on this particular topic of paradise, the sides of the north and the mount of the congregation, because in that particular quote, Lucifer is showing and telling us exactly where this opening is. And when you understand that the sides of the north, that the vaulted dome, that all of the angles of the dome meet in what is the reference of the sides of the north, that is where the North Pole is, and that the North Pole links together with Polaris, because Polaris is directly above the North Pole, and Polaris is the very center of the vaulted dome of the Earth, and that this is where the passageway, the windows of heaven are located, which lead up into the throne room of the Most High God, and which is why whenever you see, even in the book of Enoch, in the various prophets, when they are taken up into the heavens, this is where they are taken up through, is this North Pole opening, this Jacob's ladder, which leads up into the throne room of God. And so this is also where it says in Job that the place where hell lies naked beneath, that there is also this opening into the interior of Sheol, and that there is this great whirlpool which drains the waters, the oceans of the world, into the interior of Sheol, and then every 6 hours reverses course and creates what are the tides, the high and the low tides, twice a day. The 2 times there's low tides, 2 times there's high tide. It reverses directions every 6 hours, and so that also is a part of the elaboration that I will be going to when I release this book. But all of that study is just so very interesting.
It absolutely is, and I could just go off here. I'll have to contain myself. But in the Egyptian Book of the Dead, the Pharaoh would descend into the heart of the earth, and then he would get his boat, and he would, through his boat, ascend up above the firmament and sail the waters above the firmament. And there's so much I could say about the Masonic concept of Jacob's ladder that is just so confirming about that. And you're just spot on there, and I can't wait for that to come out and to see all of your research in total. There's another question here about the rings of Saturn. What do you think the rings of Saturn are?
Well, that's very interesting. It seems to me that the planets, and this is now being affirmed by the different individuals that are using this Nikon P900 camera in doing very close-up video and taking images of these various planets, that they are, they seem to be, well, they're luminous, they're luminaries, and they're showing light as is depicted in the science of cymatics, which I don't know if the listeners know what that is, but just recently I shared a video. There's an individual named Nikolai Stanford, and he's this individual that shows through using sand and water and music how tones and frequencies and sound and vibration, they create, they form, the water will take shape in these sacred geometric patterns, and that the light is also, these luminaries, they seem to be, because you're able to create light in the way that we see reflected in the stars by creating an air bubble and then sending acoustic vibration into those air bubbles. And this also ties together with the very beginning of creation in John chapter 1, where it speaks about how Christ was that light, but also as the Word, the Logos, the Memra of God, how He spoke the creation into being, and that we see reflected on an atomic level that God, the Godhead, the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit, being the light, that the energy which slows and steps down in vibration and creates the sound, the frequency, and even what we see in this third dimensional world as physicality is nothing more than energy, the light having slowed down in vibration to such degree that it takes on physical form. But essentially what it is just energy, atoms, neutrons, protons, this atomic energy, that really God is the source for all things. And as it says in John, that without Christ and Him being one with the Father, that they brought all things into being, and that without Him nothing was made. And so really understanding how cymatics is connected to that, it shows that the stars, the heavenly luminaries, as it says in, when you look up the Strong's Concordance, the passage and the word for the luminaries, that they are light. And as I show in my book, The Firmament, that the stars and the planets, these wandering stars, that they are not Earth-like, in that, because the Earth is not a planet, it's the foundation for the world order, the enclosed world system, but that the stars and the planets, they are luminaries, they're heavenly luminaries, celestial bodies, and it says that they are created of light and water, and fire, and that they're not again. And so when you look at them really close with high-powered telescopes or these P900 Nikon cameras, we're starting to see them depicted in this sacred geometric pattern, which in my mind is exhibiting exactly what we see revealed through these cymatics. And so I believe that the rings of Saturn are showing in some way this sacred geometric pattern as it is reflected in what we see Saturn being surrounded by these particular rings, and that there are even other planets. When you look at them very closely, you can see also some kind of ring-like pattern around them. But different individuals have shown in looking closely at Venus or Jupiter or Mars that they're nothing more than luminaries, and they reflect these sacred geometric patterns of light as created by the cymatics as shown in that particular science. And so that as the scriptures say, they're luminaries, and that's what I believe them to be.
Amen. We have another Saturn question here from Tracy Aussie. Has Zen any thoughts on a relationship between CERN and Saturn? I have heard that maybe where they are trying to open some sort of portal.
Well, it seems to me, and I'm not very familiar with this, but there are individuals like Troy McLaughlin who does the work on the on Saturn and its connections to CERN. I believe Anthony Patch also speaks about this, but it's their opinion that Saturn was the focus of the worship of many of the antediluvian pagan cultures, and that for some reason the belief is that this was the focus of the ancient reverence as far as the worship of the planetary systems, and that there's that if they open this portal, that they're attempting to open it in connection with Saturn, because supposedly some of these ancient deities that they came from there, and that they have origin from there. But as to whether that is true or not, I have no idea. I would assume that it would be much like the connections of Orion and the Orion star system, that there seems to be in the ancient cosmology a reverence for those particular stars as well, and that it is affirmed in the mythologies, the oral traditions of like the Dogon people. They speak about that the Anunnaki, or these fallen ones, that the rebel angels, that they claim to be from there. And there's even scripture as far as Job, allusions to Orion as well. And David, I'm sure you can comment on that as well, but there seems to be some connection with Orion and Saturn as being an origin for some of these fallen angels and these particular entities. How much that holds as far as truth, I have no idea. Maybe David might have more occultic knowledge as far as that particular side of it, and what the Freemasons might know of that. But it does seem that in the mythologies there seems to be connection to these two particular areas.
Yeah, there definitely is, and there's things that we could bring forth from Crowley on the emphasis that he placed upon Saturn in his worship system. And we know that the whole undergirding of CERN is in the occult and opening portals. They've said as much. So I think there definitely is something to that. Definitely is. We have a question from Sharon Howarth. Zen, are these electrical fields similar to or related to the commonly referenced ley lines?
Yes, absolutely. And David has done really incredible work on this as well, in speaking about the connections of these Enochian portals and these windows in heaven, and as they are depicted in the Dendera cosmology, the images of the zodiac, that they reflect this as well, and that these ley lines and also these ancient megalithic sites, even the pyramids and these megalithic structures worldwide, and being aligned and connected to these different heavenly constellations. As we said, Orion seems to be one of the predominant alignments that we see reflected in these megalithic sites, that they're tapping into as above, so below. And that there's it's this archaeoastronomy, and that there seems to be a lot of these connections with these particular portals, and with these as far as the occult rituals being performed on certain days, that is also tapping into and aligning with these particular energy fields and these energy systems. And that David also brought up in a show that we did about how there are also portals and windows of blessing, and that it's our belief too that the reverence and the honor of Sabbath, and also the worship of the real holy days, the Levitical feast days, that they also, as Ezekiel says, they connect to and align with these portals of blessing as well. And so there's both the occultic side of it as well as the godly side of it, and that yes, there's connection as above, so below, and that this is tapped into both by the old prophets and patriarchs and the priests and the worship that they did in revering the Most High God, and most certainly that this is also being tapped into by the occultic conspiratorial side of the Luciferian Satan worshippers in doing their ritual magic on the particular dates and as aligned to the particular stars and when they do their particular ceremonies.
Amen. Here's a question from George C.H. Question for Zen. Does Enoch or any other text reference the precession of the equinoxes?
Enoch speaks about the cycles of all the heavenly luminaries, and he gives great detail as to the way that the sun, the moon have their cycle, and also the stars. And he speaks about how they move through the zodiac. He even talks about how certain stars are the leaders of certain zodiacal signs, and how they are all moving. And as I said, the way that the heavenly luminaries move, because they are all moving in uniformity, they all move and revolve at the same speed, which in my opinion shows that they are all part of the same established like clockwork system that God put into place above the earth to determine the signs, the seasons, the days, the months, and the years. And this also verifies that it is the heavenly luminaries which are moving in circle above the face of the earth, and that it is the earth and light and Polaris which are non-moving and fixed and stationary. And this again, when you understand that according to the heliocentric worldview, if the earth is in orbit moving around the sun, and the sun is also moving in orbit around some galactic center, and our galaxy is moving in orbit around some universal center, and all the stars are at different distances and different light years and different parts of the galaxy. Well, as we are moving, and as the sun is moving, and as the galaxy is moving, the stars should all be disjointed, and what we see reflected in our night sky should change, so that we should never see the same thing, especially not over the course of thousands of years. Every night the stars should shift, and the constellations should be disrupted, and the patterns of the stars as they are portrayed and depicted in the celestial night, all of that should be scattered and disjointed according to how the stars are positioned, how far they are, where they are in proportion, and so there should never be any kind of uniformity. And most certainly we should not have the zodiac system being replicated night after night over thousands of years in the same pattern and in the same manner that we see reflected by even the Dendera zodiac as written thousands of years ago on the roof of that Karnak temple. And so because we do see this, again, it affirms that it is these stars and the heavenly luminaries which are moving at the same rate of speed, in the same pattern, in the same manner, in the same way, year after year, over thousands of years, even unto this day, and that it is all because we live in a geocentric universal system where the earth is the foundation for these heavenly luminaries, and that they are all enclosed under and within the firmament as the vaulted dome of the earth. That's the only way we can see this reflected in this pattern over these thousands of years, where navigators have been able to determine north just by looking and finding where Polaris is, because again, that is the very center. Polaris is the center of the vaulted dome. You find Polaris and you find north, because no matter where you are on the circle of the earth plane, Polaris is north for you, because it shows again where the North Pole is, and the North Pole is the very center of the circle of the earth.
Very, very well said. Another question here, and this is one that we've also done a program about before, and we've talked a lot about, from Valerie 15. Does Enoch say that the angels move the stars? I know the earth is not moving, for sure. It just cannot be moving. Amen, Val 15. How about it, Zen? Does Enoch say that the angels move the stars?
Absolutely. It says that, in fact, it also says that the stars are the angels, and that they are conscious and intelligent, and that they are told to hold and to maintain pattern and circuit. And when they don't, they are punished. And Enoch also gives description of that, because the 7 planets, the wandering stars, they came not forth in their time, and they did not listen to the determination of their circuits as commanded of them to be followed out. And Enoch also excuse me. Enoch also describes how there is an angel named Raguel who is put in charge of maintaining all of the heavenly hosts, these celestial luminaries, and keeping them lined up according to the pattern that God has determined for them maintaining in circuit. Because again, when we look out at the stars and the way that they move according to the time-lapse photography, they all move in uniformity, and they are all moving at the same speed. And the reason they are doing that is because they are all locked into this clockwork system that allows us to measure the passing of time from one day to 1 week to 1 month to 1 year to what is the great cycle, the movement of the zodiac, and I believe that is 25,960 years or something of thereabouts. But it's it takes the sun 72 years to move 1 degree through the 360 degrees of the zodiac, and so it takes that full measure of time. Yeah, I believe it's 2,160 years for it to move through just one of these zodiacs, one of these signs of the zodiac. And so you multiply that by 12, and that gives you the length of the great cycle, which is the sun moving through and regressing through the different houses of the zodiac, which in our modern era we have moved because there's 6,000 years of history as far as the modern age, meaning the descendants of Adam and Eve, not including the antediluvian and the pre-Adamite world, but that we have gone through the Gemini, Taurus, and Pisces, and are coming up on Aquarius. And so all that is reflected in that as well.
And I just want to make a little mention of a lot of the good work that you do in reprinting old books. And a lot of people think that the flat earth was invented by some of these wingnuts on the internet. But this has been around for a long time. And I now have in my library, I have 5 books on the flat earth that were written in the 1800s. And one of these I received from you by Alexander Gleason. And this is just such a fantastic book that you have reprinted and made available. And there's something that is a very, very good answer for people, and something that I hear a lot is that the flat earth began with the occult, and that the flat earth is an occult teaching. But on page 351 of the book that you reprinted by Mr. Alexander Gleason, he talks about the origin of the flat earth being with Pythagoras. And Pythagoras was the man that the Freemasons, the Rosicrucians, and also the Druids claim as their father also. So just speak to that a little bit, Zen, and tell us about some of the work that you do in reprinting these old books.
Yes, it was about a year ago that the Most High basically told me to open up a book, a book producing publication publisher, and so I did, and we created Sacred Word Publishing, and I wanted to do so in order to publish first these sacred scriptures, the many different extra biblical texts and manuscripts which I study from, and a lot of my favorites which not a lot of people have read or heard about, and so I wanted to make them available in a wider capacity, especially those that are difficult to find. Of course, also, like the books of Enoch, Jasher, and Jubilees, even though these have been printed multiple times by many different publishers, I wanted to publish a lot of texts which aren't even available in print. And in doing this work, I also decided to publish books like the Alexander Gleason book on Is the Earth a Globe, which is, this particular book has been out of print And I had actually the opportunity to purchase one copy a long time ago, but it sold before I got to the person that was selling it, and it sold for in excess of $100 and something. And so you could only buy this book at exhaustive amounts of money, and that's if you could find somebody to sell you a copy. And so that's one of the endeavors that we have now put forth, is to make some of these books which have been out of print and that are so very fascinating and interesting, and that are related to a lot of these biblical truths that are now coming to light in this day and age, because we are the fig tree generation, the last generation, and the Spirit is being poured out on all flesh. That one of the parts and the roles that I will play in serving my sacred vow to basically serve the kingdom is to make as much of this information, this interesting, very relevant information for the times that we are living in, available to the masses and for as cheap a cost as I can, so that we can make the information available and accessible to people. And also, even though some of these texts are available in PDF form, I know, David, you are like me in that I like to have a physical print copy.
Oh, absolutely.
So that I like to be outside in the creation with the entirety of the great mystery surrounding me when I read and study. And I don't, because I'm always having to do my own the publication of my books and to work on them on my computer, I don't want to at all read other books on the computer. But I prefer to have them in print, so I can underline, so I can highlight. And there's just nothing like having a physical print copy of the book, because we never know how long the internet will be accessible and the information available in the manner that it is now. I know that the elites hate that we have easy access to all of this information in the way that we do, and that they are even now trying to work on different ways to change that up. And so that's one of the reasons we also are endeavoring to do what we do through Sacred Word Publishing. And so the website is now being created, but we have also published other books, and I will be releasing and revealing those as well. And we have a number of other different books in line for publication. And certainly, if other individuals out there, if you have interest in certain different books and you can't find them in print, let us know, and we'll try to add that to the workload. And because we do want to make what is interesting to people available, because it just helps increase our study, and in my opinion, it is also affirming the veracity of the gospel and the secrets that are contained therein, because this information is absolutely encoded into the scriptures. And once you have revelation of these truths, in going back and studying the scripture with new light, and having the eyes to see, the ears to hear, and the mind to understand it in new way, we realize that most certainly all of these passages and all of these scriptures and all of these chapters, which are truly dependent on this understanding as key to unlocking all of this, they've been hidden there all along. And it's only because truth has been stolen from us, forbidden, and lost to us, that much of what is found within the gospel it has been misunderstood and glossed over in a way that isn't as meaningful as it now is, now that we have new understanding. I know that after I embraced flat Earth cosmology and the fact that the Earth is enclosed by a solid firmament, so much of the canonical material came to light in new and deeper and more profound manner than ever I had studied previously. And I was able also to, in now examining and studying, looking over all the extra biblical material again, to find all this information encoded into much of those texts as well. And so it's just deeply rewarding to truly be able to understand the gospel in the way that I believe God intended us to be able to. And as far as the flat Earth being an occultic principle, well, most certainly it is. I mean, this is reflected, and I write about this in my 9th book, The Flat Earth as Key to Decrypt the Book of Enoch, about how the flat Earth as revelation is an occult secret. And we see this very clearly depicted on the flag of the United Nations banner, which the United Nations, being the seat of world government, that is the organization whereby the elitists, the secret societies, the Freemason Brotherhood, basically yelled and announced to the world, we have global domination. We have taken over the entirety of the world, and we have made Albert Pike's vision of fomenting 3 global wars as means to establish an agency, an organization to control the relationships and the affairs of nations around the world, that they have absolutely manifest that dream and achieved their goal with Albert Pike's vision. And the United Nations is the manifestation of that goal. And the fact that they fly on their banner the true orientation of the earth in the way that it really is, as I showed, that it is in the manner that is depicted on the emblem of the United Nations flag, that this is the image of the earth which Enoch gives description of the movements of the sun and the moon and the heavenly luminaries, that when you apply his descriptions to the motions of the sun and the moon and the stars and the planets, according to that azimuthal equidistant projection map, the earth in surrounding circular embrace around the North Pole as center of the circle of the earth, that the earth in that orientation, you can then understand what Enoch is describing as those motions. And it's this revelation that I share and decrypt in the entirety of that book, my 9th book, The Flat Earth as Key to Decrypt the Book of Enoch. And I show that it's only by applying those motions to the circle of the earth as backdrop for these motions, as shown and depicted on the United Nations flag, that you can truly understand what Enoch is speaking about. And so most certainly this is occultic knowledge, and the fact that they fly it on the United Nations flag is confirmation of that. But I would also add in finality that even though this is a secret that the occults and the Freemason elite have and share amongst themselves, and are laughing at the rest of the world for buying into the lunacy of the heliocentric worldview, which they put forth as deception in order to set the framework for having us all bound down to their antichrist sun god. God has encoded into his own word and shown to his own prophets like Enoch. And Adam was given the book of the signs, which were one of the 5 books of creation that he left paradise with, and that he knew about these revelations and the true orientation of the earth as well, and that this knowledge has been passed down through the sons of Adam as depicted in the book of Enoch, and that the book of Enoch was passed on to Noah and his sons, and they also were passed on to Shem, and Shem passed them on to Abraham, and Abraham passed them on to his children. And as is shown in, I shared with you just recently, David, several passages from the Testament of the 12 patriarchs, where these various patriarchs like Reuben and Simeon and Zebulun and Asher and the various children of the 12 tribes, the patriarchs of the 12 tribes, Joseph and Benjamin, they all speak about the coming of Christ and how they even knew that Christ would come to redeem them and save them. Yeah. And they also quote the books of Enoch in those particular chapters, which in my mind is, again, affirmation that they knew about the books of Enoch, the cosmology contained therein, and also of the interdiction of the watchers and the fullness of the things that Enoch writes about, and that, as it says in the book of Enoch on the coming of the Son of Man, that Christ being concealed as the elect one, and that he would come as Messiah. All of those things are affirmed by the Testament of the 12 patriarchs as well.
And that is something we're definitely going to have to do a lot more talking about. Those are just some amazing passages. It not only gives so much more credibility to the book of Enoch, but likewise it gives credibility to those testaments of the 12 patriarchs. And when we think about all the messianic prophecies, there are so many in those extra biblical books that are just absolutely fascinating. And we are coming down here to crunch time, and I just want to say thank you so much to all of our FOJC listeners. You guys are just the greatest. You had some tremendous questions, and I just enjoy you so very much. And I might say also, somebody here mentioned something about Gary Wayne, and this Wednesday, Gary Wayne and I are going to be on Zen's program. And you might want to just give a little promo for that if you want, Zen.
Yes, this Wednesday evening, 8 to 10 p.m. on freedomslips.com on Studio B. David and Gary will be joining me for discussion on some of these occultic secrets and the teachings of the Essenes and other topics and subjects. And so please do join us there, and that we are doing ongoing shows and roundtables on various topics and themes, and that if you have anything of interest that you would like us to speak on or to bring forth in program, certainly you can contact me at Zen Garcia on Facebook, and just, or contact David and let either of us know, and we'll be glad to do what we can to bring forth what you are interested in hearing about and learning about. And if we don't know about it, we'll certainly try to do our homework to make ourselves knowing and informed on these topics. But I have a belief that one of us will know something about it, at least.
Well, and that's the thing that I like about yourself and Gary Wayne. We are researchers. We are not stagnant. We have not come to the place where we think we know it all or we are satisfied. We will never be satisfied. We will always be searching out the deeper things of God in the scriptures and in extra biblical material, and wherever that search will take us. And this is what makes it so exciting And this is why it's so exciting and such a great honor to have such a wonderful guest as you on. And I have come to appreciate you and your work so very much. And I'm just so thankful to be able to call you a friend and a fellow worker in the Lord and a friend of FOJC Radio. So Zen, thank you so very much for a fascinating evening. I'm going to go back and listen to it again myself because it's amazing all of the cutting-edge information that you were able to work into this brief 2-hour time period. And just once again, thank you to all of the listeners for being so great as you always are. So Zen, any last thoughts?
Just wanted to say likewise, brother. I so appreciate you and being able to fellowship with you and to round table with you and to share friendship with you and Donna and the way that we have come to know each other. I do consider you to be one of my closest associates now, and it's a beautiful thing that we have been stood up as confirming witness for one another in so many aspects of the work that we do. It is a beautiful thing because it is blessing so many people's lives and helping them to understand the truth of the revelation of so much of the teachings that, again, we are confirming witness for one another, and Gary Wayne as well. And I know that a lot of people's lives are being touched and that they are going forth and seeking the deeper and more profound aspects of the scriptures and coming in closer relationship with our King and Lord, the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. And that's what it's truly all about.
So very well said, and I just appreciate you so very much saying so, and we just love you so very much, and we just love you, the listeners, because without you we couldn't do what we do. So we just want to say good night, God bless you all, and we will see you Sunday morning, 10 a.m. on FOJC Radio Church, and we will see you on Saturday night on Now You See TV on the Midnight Ride. And by the way, we've got Brother Zen scheduled for the very first Saturday night in February 4th. Zen will be on Now You See TV, and we're going to be doing a follow-up on the Sabbath and the calendar, and you'll just want to bring your popcorn for that one. So God bless you all. Good night, and we will see you Sunday morning on FOJC Radio Church. God bless you all.
God bless all. Good night.
You can contact us at FOJC, Post Office Box 4174, Evansville, Indiana 47724-4174. Or you can check our website out at www.fojcradio.com. Or you can email us at lastdayschurch@cs.com. Or you can call us at 812-473-3735. Thanks, and God bless.
What they have said as being evidently true without, why would we ever question? And I never did so. And it was really second nature for us to accept the indoctrination that we have all been programmed into believing in growing up in school and going through the educational process, looking at the globe, sitting around with our classmates and everybody looking at the globe and the countries of the world and the way that they're all laid out, and the Earth being a sphere, and the whole, as far as even with the cartoons and the scientific programs, Cosmos and everything, where they have shown us repeatedly over and over again the heliocentric model for how our supposed solar system and planetary system is set up, and how it also is repeated as galaxy and other star systems, that every one of those stars out there is also a sun. The Hubble space photographic evidence of the cosmos, the various galaxies, all of the different images of the different planets, the moons of all these various planets, and how it all just seemed to make sense that, well, that was the way that it was. And then when I began to really look into the photographic evidence, after I was introduced to the possibility that what we had been told and what we had been indoctrinated into all of our lives could be fabricated, well, that was one of the things that all of us immediately go to, is, and also those that want to refute flat earth cosmology, the biblical geocentric model for world as possibility. Well, that's the thing that they do, is they always fall back on, well, all these images of Earth that NASA has taken. And so when I began to examine some of that in a more thorough manner and looking into it very in depth, well, there was already some things that came up which did not make sense, and that was the various images of the Earth that have been taken over the years from multiple supposed Apollo space program, from different satellites that have been sent up there now, and even just recently they just sent up a new supposed weather satellite and have all these really high def images of the Earth as a globe. I don't know if you've seen those yet or not, David.
Yeah.
But
yes, I have.
Yeah. And so, people are falling back on those. But again, if you look at all of these different images, the full summation of them over the life of NASA and the various programs, the various Apollo mission programs, and the Clementine satellites, all these different images, well, there's some contradictions in the size of just the continents themselves, North America, South America, Africa, and also with the colors of the oceans, the size, the proportions with regard to the moon.
You're listening to FOJC Radio, preaching the gospel of the kingdom and teaching the doctrine of Christ to the whole world.
Well, good evening and welcome to FOJC Radio. I am David Carrico, and we are here for a special Monday night broadcast. Our program tonight is entitled Flat Earth and Scientism, with our very special guest and good friend, Mr. Zen Garcia. Welcome to FOJC Radio, Zen.
Honored to be here. I appreciate the opportunity, and it's always a blessing to be with you and Donna, and I thank you for the invitation.
And you are no stranger to our FOJC Radio listeners, because we have many of our projects that we've done together on our YouTube channel, so I'm sure that almost everybody knows who you are and a little bit about what you do. But in case there might be someone that doesn't, why don't you tell people how to get in contact with your ministry and all of your material before we go forward?
Okay, no problem at all. The easiest way to contact me is through Facebook, Zen Garcia. I post all of my upcoming shows there, which I do 2 radio programs, one on Revolution Radio every Wednesday evening, 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern, at freedomslips.com, and I do a Saturday evening broadcast 7 to 9 p.m. on truthfrequencyradio.com. I'm the webmaster for fallenangels.tv. Our YouTube channels are Endeavor Freedom and Zen Garcia. And you can find most of my books located on my author website, zengarcia.com.
And I just really appreciate Zen coming on tonight. He has done so much work in this area of flat Earth, and our broadcast is entitled Flat Earth and Scientism, Refuting the False Science of the Spinning Globe. And I did a teaching, my first on flat Earth, called Falling Off the Flat Earth, where I dealt with the scriptural issues. But tonight, Zen has been so kind as to come on and talk about the scientific aspects of it. And it's the false scientism that keeps the globe spinning, so to speak. So I believe the first thing that most people say when they hear about the flat Earth is they bring up the NASA photos. You know, haven't you seen the pictures? So if you will, Zen, just here at the top, let's talk a little bit about the NASA photographs.
Well, I think this is really important as well, because for most of us, in buying into the heliocentric worldview, we have accepted NASA as the authority, and the photographic evidence and the videographic evidence, all of the belief in the astronauts as far as the visitations to the moon, the satellite programs, the Voyager, all these different programs that they have, even the so-called secretive programs where they have colonized Mars and these kind of different things, the Mars Defense Forces and all of this. And so all of us have, without really even second guessing, have bought into and accepted, and so there's seems to be no coherency. And then when you listen to even the testimonies of like the various astrophysicists, Neil Tyson, he speaks of the Earth as being an oblate spheroid, and that it's supposedly not round as in a perfect sphere, but in the shape of a pear. And so they can't even stay coherent in their presentation of the Earth. And there was also another image that I've seen that was supposedly an image of the Earth from space, and it showed all the cloud layers and the cloud bands, and they weren't they stood out and above the Earth, whereas the oceans, being the supposed showed the rotundity, and all these cloud layers were standing out past it. And so this was a whole nother way of presenting the Earth in this spheroid shape. And so when you look into and start to examine, well, you realize that in this day and age, when we're supposed to have all these 20,000 satellites up there, we should be able to view the Earth in all of its glory 24 hours a day in live feeds and live streams through various different websites from all these different companies that have these, privately owned satellites and all these government satellites from the various different space agencies. Why they wouldn't have just 24-hour live feed of the Earth from different angles and perspectives is one of the clues as to why the Earth, why we should question what NASA is putting out. And again, when you look into some of the images that we have of the Earth, they are clearly defined as being composites and having been pieced together and formed in the shape and in the perspective that we have them. And so the fact that there's only even a handful of these images over the length of the life of NASA and all of these different programs is also makes you wonder as to why that is. Why is there not just thousands of images, hundreds of thousands of images, or even, thousands and hundreds of thousands of videos of all of this evidence? And then the other thing which really made me question as to the relevancy of what we are being shown in depiction from the various NASA images and these composite images is the video that was gathered through the Freedom of Information Act by Barry Seibel when he did his documentary, A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon, where it shows the Apollo 11 astronauts, Michael Collins and Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin, two of them in the lunar capsule, and they are trying to use the window of the lunar module to hoax and to fabricate the Earth as being in a spherical shape, which you have to question. And in this particular video, the radiation belts without them being affected adversely, which in my mind, if they are not able to achieve this now, and they are having to consider what to do in order to protect the lives of the astronauts and also the computer systems, how in the world were they able to do this multiple times during the Apollo missions when the computer technology that they had to achieve those missions was less than the computer technology that we have in our regular cell phones in this day and age? And so it just absolutely does not make any sense. And then Bart Seibel, the person that put together the whole documentary on A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon, he does a follow-up of that particular video, that documentary, called Astronauts Gone Wild, where he goes and he speaks with each one of the different astronauts that claim to have been on the surface of the moon. And he asked them to share in testimony their experience. He asked them about the Van Allen radiation belts, and there's a particular testimony I remember very clearly from Alan Bean, where he speaks about not even remembering going through the Van Allen radiation belts, but then he says that he remembers one time where he had his eyes closed and he could see these tracers of lights flickering in his eyes when he had his eyes closed, but that was the only thing he remembered of them, and none of them were adversely affected at all, and they were not given any amount of protection from the radiation. There's the Russian scientists also have claimed that in order to truly protect the astronauts from these radiation belts, they would have to encase the lunar module in so much lead that they wouldn't even be able to get it off of the ground. And so for us, in their own testimony, in all of their own words, it is impossible for them to have achieved getting beyond the radiation belts then and even now. So that in and of itself brings into question all of the Apollo missions and all of these supposed astronauts having gone to the moon and back. And then when you look at the work of, even as I mentioned, Rob Skiba, and breaking down and showing that a lot of these NASA images are completely contrived and hoaxed. And there's been many that have also examined the official Apollo images, where they show multiple light sources and various shadow angles to the images that absolutely confirms them having been fabricated in some Hollywood studio somewhere, because there's no way that they could have achieved taking these images on the moon when the sun was the only light source, and all the shadows would have ran parallel to one another, going all in one direction. And so that I ask anybody to consider the things that we're speaking about here. It shows and has the full audio of where they are speaking with the Houston, with the command center, and talking about how they were going to hoax it. And then you can see how they indeed used the window of the lunar module to fabricate this deception. And if the Earth is indeed round and in a spherical shape and like a globe, well, why would they need to hoax it in such manner and try to lead us in deception into believing it is in a shape that it should already be in? And so that's another thing that really made me question as to the relevancy of what we've been showing. And then we know our brother Rob Skiba has done really incredible work where he's utilized Photoshop as a tool to examine some of these official NASA images. And one in particular, he was able to take a very famous image of the astronaut, one of the Apollo astronauts on the moon, with the supposed Earth rising in the background above his left shoulder. And so Rob pulls this directly from the JPL website, I believe it was, or the official NASA website. It was an official NASA image. He pulled it, downloaded directly from the website, posted it into his Photoshop, quickly changed a few of the layers and the contrast, and it shows clearly that there is a rectangular box around the Earth. And it, in my mind, it had to have been one of the images of the Earth that was fabricated through the lunar window, the module, and they had cut and paste this into the image in order to, again, to show that the astronauts had actually achieved, and NASA had accomplished sending them to the moon, and that they were there on the lunar surface, and that the Earth was distant in the background. And so all of that is called into question as well, as far as the veracity of whether we ever went to the moon. And then just recently, NASA released in a video that they released called Orion Trial by Fire, where they spoke about the difficulties of achieving a mission they are working on now, which is called the Orion Project, where they spoke about sending these different astronauts to Mars for a manned mission to Mars, and how they were unable to, at this time, to get beyond the Van Allen radiation belts. And they spoke about how sending the Orion mission through the Van Allen radiation belts, that because of the extreme radiation, that not only would it compromise the computer systems, but it would also endanger the life of the astronauts. And so they spoke about in this video of having to figure out how to protect the astronauts and to send them beyond